Hey YouTube, it's Chaplain B, and welcome to my channel, Keep Calm and Call the Chaplain, where we talk about all things spiritual care practice. You are our honored guests. Thank you for joining us. In this episode, I want to break down a show that I came across recently, another medical drama called The Pitt from HBO. And what I want to do is I want to demonstrate a little bit of what spiritual care providers do in a hospital setting, and I want to use a scene that involves the doctor, two siblings, and their final goodbye. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is from The Pit, episode 3 on HBO.
Your dad has an advance directive expressing his wishes, which says that IV fluids and medications are okay, but no artificial life support, no CPR.
He doesn't want a bunch of machines keeping him alive.
Things get worse. Sometimes allowing for a comfortable natural death can be the most humane path. Well, we know he expressed his wishes in writing. Do not intubate.
We're thinking try it for a week.
That would be a very painful week. He wouldn't get a lot of rest with all the monitors and all the blood tests. He might need to be sedated. He might need to be restrained because he'd be in an unfamiliar place with a very uncomfortable tube down his throat. And he wouldn't really know what was happening. Elderly patients can often develop psychosis.
But he might get better.
Or he might get worse. What would you do?
I really can't answer that for you. This is your father. That's your decision to make. I can guarantee you that we will keep him as comfortable as possible if a natural death is what you choose.
But he's not your father.
Please don't tell me you're going to intubate that poor man.
It's what the family wants.
So what? They want to torture him?
I explained all that.
If I co-sign, we can override their durable power.
They're threatening to go to the hospital attorney.
Let them. Call the ethics committee. They'll agree with us.
No, you're probably right, but we don't have that kind of time. We are stuck.
One of the first things that I notice as a spiritual care provider in this scene is conflict. Now, conflict sounds like it's a negative thing, but conflict is a normal part of the human experience. And in fact, conflict can help us to get very clear about what we need and what we value and about what we want from other people. In this space, I would be assessing the conflict that's taking place. I would note that there's conflict between the providers. I would also note that there's conflict between the siblings and potentially some conflict between the siblings and their father. Perhaps there's something that hasn't been said that needs to be said now that the moments are drawing to a close. Sometimes in relationships, especially family dynamics, when there's a complicated relationship, sometimes saying goodbye, especially when the children in this case are not ready to say goodbye, sometimes there can be anger. They need to say their goodbyes, and it sounds like they're not ready to do that. And so the provider in this episode is the one that facilitates that conversation by saying, okay, so I understand you're not religious. And it's interesting how the provider brings this up, knowing that they need to say their goodbyes. The provider says, I once heard of a Hawaiian tradition, and he shares the tradition to the siblings. And it seems to be well received, and the reason why it's well received is because this intervention that the provider used, based off of his assessment that they needed to say their goodbyes, this intervention met the need that was present in the room. So the brother asks, well, how does this work? Is that all you need to do? So notice that the brother is focused on what do I need to do? What needs to be done? But the sister is relatively quiet in this scene. Now, later, as you see in the episode, and spoiler alert if you haven't seen the episode, but later, one of the things that you notice is that the brother, as he's going through this Hawaiian ritual that the provider taught him about forgiveness, about asking for forgiveness, about forgiving others, it's a very peaceful thing to do to say goodbye to somebody. Well, as he's doing that, he invites his sister to do the same. And immediately there's more conflict. And it comes out that the sister did indeed have a message that needed to be said. There was something that needed to be said that had not been said yet. And she begins to say it. And what it is she regretted the fact that her father seemed to have, from her perspective, seemed to have a better relationship with her brother than he had with her. And in this conversation, she's finally able to say, and in some ways to say to her father directly, how she feels. And it's only after that moment that she's finally able to say her goodbyes, and the siblings are able to grieve together. As a spiritual care provider, one thing that I know is true is that these moments of saying goodbye to our loved ones are immensely complex, and they take time. And sometimes saying goodbye can be confusing to our providers because in their minds it may be pretty straightforward. We ought to do this or we ought not to do that. But because we're human beings and because we are so complex and because what we're really talking about is not just science, but we're also talking about the sacred strands of who we are that involve our stories and our experiences and how we love and how we connect to others and how we say our goodbyes to those that we love. As a spiritual care provider, I'm cognizant of those things, and in that moment, I'm able to both apply assessments and interventions, spiritual assessments and spiritual interventions for the family to be able to conduct these conversations and to open up this sacred space, but I'm also able to relay these things over to our medical providers and relay to them what they may be missing in this moment to bring them a little bit of clarity. I want to say thank you for joining me in my channel. Keep calm and call the chaplain. Thank you for honoring me with your presence, and thank you for your time in learning a little bit about spiritual care practice.